on the show today, Mimi Kuo-Deemer. So Mimi is a yoga teacher, a Qigong teacher. She founded, I believe, the first yoga school in Beijing called Yoga Yard. She's a famous person for Try Yoga. Her YouTube channel has millions and millions of hits teaching Qigong and yoga. So I've had a lesson with her, which I very much enjoyed. Mimi, welcome.
Oh, thanks, Mark. It's great to be on the show.
So tell us a little bit about your story. How did you get interested in the body?
My mother. It always goes back to the mother.
Okay. Tell me about your mother. I feel like I should have an Austrian accent for this. What happened? What was she into? Yoga, Qigong? What was the deal?
Well, she was into yoga. She did yoga when she was pregnant. She had a book from the 70s that she gave me when I was flailing around in Beijing, not very healthy, stressed, really suffering. But I got into the body actually before that, and it was my mother as well. And that was when I was born. I had turned in toes and really kind of weak knees, weak immune system generally. But she thought, because I had pigeon-toed feet, that if I was sent to ballet school, that would
I was going to say, it's the opposite for ballet, isn't it? If you see me on my phone, I forgot to say I always take notes on my phone during these. So if anyone on YouTube is thinking, why Mark's so rude, he's texting, I'm not, I'm taking notes. So she sent you to ballet school. All right. In China? Tell us the geography here. This is in the UK and China. Where?
I was born in upstate New York.
Upstate New York. Okay. So you're in upstate New York. You're 3 years old and you get sent to ballet school.
Well, I should be clear. Actually, I was 4 because we'd moved to Arizona, and that's when she put me into ballet school. I was not very good. I was uncomfortable in the tutu. They didn't progress me very far. I didn't progress myself very far. By the time I was in junior high, I took an interest in dance. By the time I was in high school, I auditioned for the Prima Donnas, which was the modern dance troupe of University High in Tucson, Arizona. That's where we lived by then. And I was never very good. I still liked it a lot. I was trying my best, but I pursued jazz, ballet, modern, continued with ballet in just for technique when I was in college. And then again, it was my mother when I was living in China, kind of backtracking to where we started off. She gave me this book from the 70s. It was a photocopied book. I had a woman in a frumpy looking unitard doing some yoga, and she thought this would be good for me. So I took this photocopied book and I started doing some of the movements in it. And immediately I felt some sort of shift, and I was really, I had digestive issues, I had asthma, I had general high levels of stress. I was living in China I was working as a photojournalist at the time. I had stomach ulcers that were caused by all kinds of things going wrong at the hospital. So when I started doing the practices, I felt embodied for the first time. Quite a long time. That took me to getting more interested in movement again, and I neglected my body for many years. So getting back into my body was kind of this watershed. By 97, I left Beijing for a while and I moved back to the States. And when I was in New York working, I started doing some yoga classes at a local kind of community center in Brooklyn. Loved it, kept it going, and just at home. And by the year 2000, I'd gone back to Beijing, gone back to California, ended up in Los Angeles, where one of my best friends lives, in Santa Monica and Venice. She took me to her yoga teacher at the time he was teaching at Yoga Works, and this was in 2000. It was just as the big boom of yoga was beginning. And I was going through a difficult relationship. I, again, had been kind of neglecting my body. And in the first 5 minutes of that class, I was in tears. Just released something really deep in me. And I was there every other day, pretty much. after that class.
Yoga works, big boom happening, lots of great teachers around that place and that time. So who were the big influences on you? I think I know at least one of them.
Eric Schiffman. Yeah.
Eric Schiffman. Yeah, I had a little exchange with him. He seemed like a great guy. I was kind of sad we couldn't get him for the conference because he seemed such a cool guy. I really just liked his vibe when we had a little exchange of messages.
He's wonderful. Yeah. So Eric Schiffman was a big influence. Donna Farhi later on. She's my main mentor and teacher and friend. And later I met Mathew Cohen, who was also teaching in Los Angeles around that time. He was one of the first teachers at Sacred Movement, which was a school founded by Max Strom and where Eric Schiffman taught, Shiva Ray, Saul David Ray, Sarah Powers, all these kind of names.
Rock stars. These are
they're the yoga celebrities of today.
Oh, yoga celebrities existed, yeah? Okay.
Yeah. But the classes I took with Mathew were powerful because he introduced me to Qigong, and he was blending Qigong, yoga, Tai Chi, lots of different kind of movement principles. We, by then, had a yoga studio in Beijing. I invited him there to teach.
So you kept the Chinese connections. So that wasn't just a job. There was you kept some sort of business connections out there. Do you have family out there? I'm trying to understand the geography here.
So I went back and forth for years. I spent a total of about 13 years in Beijing, and in between some of the stays there, I came back to the US to work and do things. But in 2002, I opened the yoga studio called Yoga Yard. It's still running. It's still going. It survived the pandemic.
It's huge now. I spoke to a Chinese friend just 2 days ago, and she'd literally just come from China, and she told me that yoga's huge in China now.
Yeah, it's huge. And so Mathew trained some of our first teachers at Yoga Yard. He was a real big influence. He's still someone I hold dear to my heart, and he and I have gone on to actually co-teach some stuff. We did some retreats and things like that over the last few years together, which have gone really well. And he sparked this interest in Qigong, which since 2002 has grown in my kind of interest. And as I get older, I think it's shifted significantly more towards Qigong for me. I still love yoga, but I don't practice it as much anymore.
So the question I'd have for you really here is what, and I'm similar journey, by the way. I find myself more drawn. This is why I reached out to you originally, was just to get some lessons. Someone I found that recommended, and I'd heard of your teacher, and someone said, oh, you should talk to Mimi. We've got a mutual couple of friends. I found myself, so I got a bit older, go, okay, maybe Qigong is kind of appealing to me. What was it that you maybe weren't getting from yoga, or that appealed to you to make you say, okay, I want to take up this whole other practice and be a beginner again? And, it's not necessarily an easy path. So how did that happen?
Well, it was such a gradual evolution. Since 2002, it's been woven into my asana practice, and it's been kind of there right alongside my asana practice and often thrown in with it. And the first time when I did Qigong with Mathew, I stood in just Tadasana, but it was the Qigong version of it, Wuji. And my hands started getting super hot. I felt more grounded and connected to kind of a steadiness and an internal stillness than I had in all the yoga that I'd done. I also felt the flow of energy. And when I say that, it's energy. People say, well, do you believe in energy? I don't believe in energy. What is energy? It can't be conceptually described. It has to be felt. And
there was a sensation there that was in some way evocative, powerful, whatever you want to call it. You felt something.
Yeah. And so that drew me to it immediately. The softness, the fluidity, that drew me to it. As I got more interested in it, I studied with teachers who shared 5-element theory, 5 phases, and Chinese medicine. That drew me in even more. It shifted my health. I was fairly benefited from yoga in, huge capacity. And then certain things about my energy level, my digestion, my sort of chronic asthma thing that was going on, all of these things were directly impacted by me starting Qigong. Understanding as well, sort of the theories behind Qigong was another level for me, adding on to kind of how I structure my days, depending on the time of day and what activity I was doing, depending on the season and what was the energy of the season. All of this got me more interested in Taoism, which is the kind of, the foundation of these ideas.
Definitely.
And,
I love it. I'm obsessed with
that. And as soon as I jumped into the Taoist ship, I was set sailing. I just
it's got a way of putting you in, huh?
Wave after wave after wave. I'm just there, and it's just so attractive on so many levels to me, in ways philosophically that I hit dead ends with yoga.
Mm-hmm.
Buddhism and Taoism have a lot more overlap for me. So to answer your question, what was a shift? It was so gradual.
Mm-hmm.
I think now, particularly since the lockdown, I've had time to decide where I want to put my focus.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not traveling into London. I'm, like many people, home.
Where are you based now?
Oxfordshire, in
Nice.
Northwest Oxfordshire. Big garden. It's been a beautiful, spring, summer. And I decided, well, I want to be practicing 3 hours a day, doing all the things I want to do. I also want to take up an opportunity where maybe I can study with these teachers that I started studying with in Beijing. Another teacher, Yang style Tai Chi teacher in London. And I said, can we do it via Zoom? And they agreed. And that's just catapulted my studies.
Great. It's quite an opportunity, huh?
And everything that I'm drawn to do right now is internal martial arts.
For me, there was a journal of subtlety. Like, I started jumping around, beating people up. And then I thought, well, maybe I could jump around without beating people up. And then I thought maybe I could jump around a bit less. And then I thought, well, maybe I could just move and not jump and not have to do press-ups and chaturangas. And then, now as I'm going, I'm not only 40 now, but I'm still going, it's not that I'm physically incapable of doing the jumping around. It just sort of bores me a bit. And what interests me more is the subtle layers and the sort of subtleties and the feeling and the nuance. And it's difficult to get the nuance at 1,000 miles an hour in hot yoga or hard style martial arts. The nuance is lost with the muscularity, and maybe it's possible to combine, but that my interest has got more and more. And you see the same thing with any art. Like, if you're into food, right? People start off crude, and then they normally get, it's a subtle wine tasting. I have gone French for this part of the interview. They get more and more refined.
With a French accent.
Yeah, and they end up speaking in French accent. No one knows what happened, But it's just see what I mean. That there's this journey to refinement and subtlety that you don't hear of many people who start off with Tai Chi and end up with Koko Shinkai karate. It tends, do you know what I mean? It tends, and sometimes people just think, oh, you're getting old and lazy and fat and tired and knackered. But I don't think it's just that, because I'm actually in reasonable shape still. But this interest gets more refined. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think there's something about the age and the energy of yin and yang shifting. When we're young, we have a lot more yang energy. That's just in our nature. We're growing and we're expanding and we're exploring, and our body needs to move more. And as we get older, the yang starts to shift more towards yin, and we look a little bit more into the subtlety and the refinement and the slowing down, the meditative qualities and the nourishing qualities, the nourishing life.
I think this is important as well. When young people come to me and say, hey, should I study a martial art? I'm like, yeah, go to Taekwondo and kick someone in the head, and go to Jiu-Jitsu and choke someone out. And then, but if they're 20, I say that.
Yeah.
And if they're 40, I might say, well, I got a Systema and there's health practices, and you can, it's a bit more chilled now. Do you know what I mean? I feel like we should be aware that life change and other factors influence that choice, right? It doesn't have to be at the same time of life everything is perfect for us.
And that's a really difficult concept for a lot of people in anywhere in the world, but I think particularly in Europe and America, where there's such an emphasis on exercising to feel younger.
Right. right? And it seems to me that there's what Taoism's good at is appreciating cycles and flow.
Yeah, and it just respects where you're at, and there's a deep respect for aging, unlike the West. And, in Tai Chi, Mathew Cohen was who kind of prompted this idea. He said, "Practice and train for 10 years older than you are."
That's interesting. So you're sort of preparing for the age you're moving into, rather than trying to go 10 years back, which I think is the normal thing in yoga. I see people jumping around. There's a sort of a desperation to it sometimes. You know what I mean? Like, gotta keep that 30-year-old body. It's like, you're not 30 anymore. You're 40, you're 50. Yeah, I mean, being a yoga teacher can add a bit of shelf life kind of thing, but there's a lack of acceptance of the aging process sometimes, I see.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think it's possible within yoga, absolutely, and it's reflected within the yoga traditions of people who are exploring it and not seeing it as a fixed system. It's the evolution of the yoga practice and the evolution of the way in which we can understand yoga and kind of take it out of the context that it's been shoved into for whatever reasons as this practice of strong asana and dynamic fast practice. There is a beautiful subtlety and depth to it, but I think especially modern postural asana yoga, it's young. We're still unsure about what that tree is going to look like. So I think there's some great teachers out there exploring the direction that it can go in and reaching.
Evolve. So I guess this is another thing that's very Taoist, is appreciating context more generally, isn't it? Like, because I know students who practice in different part of their cycle as women in different practices or seasons. Should we be doing the same practice in the depths of winter as the height of summer? Like, probably not, right? And yet there's a way in which I see people looking for constancy. Like, I just want to get the right formula of Wim Hof breathing and then followed by 30 minutes of, Iyengar yoga. And it's like, that formula is never going to work because like COVID, life shifted.
Yeah.
Or aging, or have you got kids, or what's your work doing right now? Like, my work goes in seasons of certain times a year. We've got this big conference coming up that's totally changing my practice because I just got a lot less time. Like, we have to understand context, I think, to practice intelligently.
Absolutely. I also think that with Taoism, there's Zhuangzi, who was one of the ancient Taoist sages. He was really fond of animals because he said animals, they are in tune and in touch with their innate nature. They're not trying to be anything other than they are. Whereas human beings, I think we forget our innate nature and we forget our connection to the seasonality and the energies. And I look at my cats, and they're very different in the summer than they are in the winter.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And most animals are.
You don't have to tell them, right? They don't have to look at their calendar and go, "Oh,
we override it."
Yeah. Oh,
this is the blessing and the curse of the limbic and the frontal cortex, right? The frontal cortex can override the limbic and everything else.
Let's take a step back. If someone said to you, Mimi, I heard you do Qigong. What's Qigong? Where would you sort of start them off with that sort of awful interview question?
I think it's such a useful question because a lot of people don't really know what it is. I would say, first of all, it's an umbrella term that encompasses up to 3,000 years of all movement, meditation, and breathing practices. And in that capacity, because it's inclusive of all of that, it's both martial, it's medical, and it's spiritual.
And in Chinese philosophy, that's not a big deal to be all three, right? Yeah. So from the West, it's like we wouldn't go to the doctors and expect spiritual advice and him to make us a badass fighter. That would be strange, right? You wouldn't go to the NHS and say, "Doctor, can I have some antibiotics and can I work on my side kick?" And that's kind of laughable. But tell me if I'm wrong here. Obviously, you know more about Chinese culture than me, but from a Chinese cultural background, that's just completely common sense.
It's common sense because there's not a separation of the physical, the spiritual, and the mental. It's all qi. And so, especially from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective, the qi flow through your body is governed and regulated by the organ system, and the organ system can go in and out of balance. So any practice that affects the qi is going to affect all of those qualities, your physical being, your emotional states, your mental clarity. And exercise from the very beginning has been packaged in with self-cultivation. There's sort of a few pillars that people would approach. First, you work on your virtue, which also affects our intention in our mind, and that will affect the qi. You work on the food you eat, so that will affect the qi that you take in and you use as life energy just through your body, digestively. You work on lifestyle, so depending on when you go to sleep and when you wake up, this will affect your qi. You work on meditation and breathing practices, visualization, because that will affect the heart, primarily the heart mind, and this is the supreme sovereign, like the emperor or empress of your body.
Very poetic Chinese systems, emperors and empresses.
And you do movement, because you need to move the qi, and you need to keep the body supple, and you need to keep the body healthy, and you need to keep the body fit, but you don't need to make the body superhuman and godlike, which is the avenue and the direction that the Greeks went down and that we've in the West.
The Adonis-like physique, the statues of the superhuman, the perfect human.
Bigger, better, faster, and then more impossibly beautiful. Right? And this is the archetype of the Greek.
Stronger, more, isn't it? Yeah. Was it faster, stronger, higher? I think that's the motto of the Olympics, which is the sort of Western idea. And I think we could probably add more beautiful on the external to that.
Absolutely.
Okay, so tell me again, what is Qigong?
Okay, so it's medical, martial, and spiritual. It is a practice that I think it is intended to move the qi throughout the body in an unobstructed way, so uninhibited flow of qi. Okay. One of the hallmarks of it, I think, is that it circulates the blood without taxing the lungs, and this is really important. So many things we think of as exercise have to have cardiovascular work in them. We need to, run, swim, jog, bike, do fast yoga to get the heart rate up. But there's a Chinese idiom for everything. And one of the Chinese idioms that my teacher likes to say is "Han chu qi bu chuan," which means the sweat pours, but the breath never quickens.
The sweat pours, but the breath never quickens. Okay, so the idea is generating heat without getting yourself out of breath. And you see that with some of the standing poses, right? People are sweating, but they're not doing anything aerobically. If anything, they're just standing there.
They're not breathing hard. They're not taxing the lungs, which in Chinese medicine are the chancellors to the heart. So if you want an emperor and sovereign and heart that is strong and stable, you want a second in command that's not depleted. Because
the chancellor is the second in command. This is it's going to confuse our German friends here who have the chancellor number one.
Sorry.
They killed the Kaiser a long time ago. They don't have Kaisers anymore. That's emperor.
Vice premier.
Vice premier. Okay, the president is the vice president. Okay, we got it. Chancellor. Okay, got it. This both I love and this infuriates me about all Chinese arts are just poetry in a way which is beautiful and at the same time confusing sometimes. Okay, so obviously the question now becomes, actually one more thing first. It's spelt in different ways. So you sent me a Facebook message which is Qigong spelled K-I-G-O-N-G, like Qigong, as one word. I've seen that as two words. I've seen it spelled C-H-E-G-U-N-G, and these just sort of romanizations of Chinese characters. They're all the same, right? There aren't differences.
So K would be Japanese. I don't think I would have put in K, but Q is the conventional spelling of Qigong. So Qi is pronounced Qi.
Okay, I've also seen it spelled C-H-I. So
it also is C-H-I, which you hear Tai Chi.
Yeah.
Those two Qis don't refer to the same thing at all.
They don't refer to the same thing. Okay, that's great to know. Say the difference.
So Qigong, Qi is life energy. It's everything that is animating the world, refined or more dense. Tai Chi or Tai Chi, J-I. Ji means ultimate or the axis. So Tai Chi would be the supreme ultimate axis.
Modest. It's such a modest name, isn't it? Tai Chi. Very modest. Nice. Okay, so even though are they pronounced the same, or am I missing an inflection? I know Mandarin's got all these inflections that I might be missing. Is it just spelled differently, or is it pronounced differently?
Well, they're two different characters. They're two different pronunciations. Part of the mess that we've inherited is China's civil war. So when the Taiwanese and the Chinese Communist government had a civil war, Taiwan broke off. The KMT, Kuomintang, broke off from mainland China and established its own republic in Taiwan. They developed a romanization system called Wade-Giles.
Okay.
And that was the first generation of exported romanization to the West. So you get things like spelling Taiji as Taichi. Then along comes the Chinese romanization, which is called pinyin, and its own interpretations on how to romanize Chinese. And that was a later exporting, but as mainland China grew sort of grew on the world stage, so to say, like the standardization for romanization switched over to mainland Chinese versions, which is pinyin. It's kind of considered the worldwide standard. So that's the QI. Okay. And in Taiji, it's Taiji in the mainland Chinese romanization.
Gong.
So it's just
the same as Kung, like Kung Fu, Qigong, Qigong.
Kung Fu. Kung Fu should be pronounced in Mandarin, Kung Fu.
Okay.
G-O-N-G.
This is great. One of my students said, I've studied Japanese martial arts. And he said, what's the difference between Japanese and Chinese martial arts? And I said, well, it's a big subject, and I'm not an expert, but I said Chinese martial arts are complicated and they're confusing and ambiguous and poetic. They were the first, and I said, look, I don't know for sure, but they were the first words that came to mind. Like, it's big, China's a huge country, and it's complicated. And at the same time, there's ambiguity, like characters can mean different things. And is that a fair description of like the world we're getting into here?
Well, I think it comes back to the Tao. The Tao is everything and cannot be named. It is the ultimate mystery, and yet what animates all things. And so you have a foundational religious and philosophical tradition based on not having strict definitions.
Right. So it's very sort of Western scientific to say, but what exactly is a quark? How many centimeters is a meter? It's very specific. And the Chinese guys will be, well, it sort of depends, right? It depends on the context. Like, no, but is it 100 centimeters or 101? There's a way in which I always want to pin things down when I talk to Qigong or Tai Chi teachers, and they never let me pin them down. It's like trying to knit fog. And let me try and pin you down then. What is Qi? What is Qi or Qi? What is Qi from the Qigong? What is that?
Qi, one of the best, so let me back up. Qi in Chinese culture is in everything. It's just woven into the fabric of the language. Tian qi is the weather. Qi se is the color of your face. Sheng qi is to get angry. So it's just the manifestation of energy. One of the best definitions I know of is Qi is the energetic blueprint that gives rise to the formation of all matter.
So one more time slowly, I like it. One more time.
Energetic blueprint that gives rise to the formation of all matter.
So the patterns you see.
The energetic blueprint.
What does energetic mean here? Help me out.
Well, I'll back it up in a minute. Sure. The energetic blueprint that gives rise to all matter. So this was in a book I read it's called The Spark in the Machine. And he's a Western doctor who studied Chinese medicine. And he says Western medicine gets stumped at embryology. They don't know where and how it comes into existence, what that spark creates, how we grow in a very differentiated kind of and unique way. So embryology is kind of stumping Western medicine, but the Chinese have said, oh, it's just qi. And that's the reason why there is differentiation in the world. So rocks come out of the earth not as one solid, similar mass, same height, same quality. Rock emerges from the earth in variation and in different form and shape and color and texture. That's qi. So it's this, we can't say what energy is. We can't say what qi is. Science can't say what it is, but it is so just embedded into the way in which the Chinese have always looked at where things come from and why there's differentiation. So qi, okay, let me back this up again.
We've got time.
So there was something soupy, undifferentiated, a state of oneness called primordial qi. And this is before anything it came into existence. There was this huндун, this is primordial qi. And then the belief is that that primordial qi at some point started to differentiate itself into yin and yang, rarefied and dense qi. Those then split into heaven as yang qi and earth as yin qi. And as those types of, that primordial qi differentiated into these two types of yin and yang qi, you had this movement and cyclical pattern of balance within a wholeness. And within yin and yang, what people often forget is that the seed of yin is always within yang and vice versa. Side note, this is why people who sometimes do yin yoga are so flabbergasted by Qigong, because yin yoga is flopping. They think it's yin. But when they start to move, they think that's yang. And with Qigong, you never separate them. Chinese have never separated them. They're always together. Mm-hmm. And the orientation and integrity of practice is the balance of the two.
Right. The idea of yin, yoga or yang, anything would be
primordial oneness into differentiation. You get then this sense of yin and yang, heaven and earth, and then riding onto the backs of yin and yang, where this is how the creation story goes, where the myriad creatures. And they created everything that we know, but they also brought in the five elements and the five phases and the seasons. And within that, there's a very syncretic view of each season relates to each element or phase. Each phase has a corresponding organ system within the body. For example, fire, summer, the season we're in, has the heart, the pericardium, the heart protector, the small intestine, which is like the filter for the heart, and something called the triple heater, which is like a thermostat. All these four organs relate to fire phase. Within the fire element organs, then you have a differentiation of times of day that they're more active. And it kind of gets, they have specific emotions that they correspond to, colors, sounds, odors, characteristics in or out of balance. All of this, though, is the same stuff as primordial qi. So everything that is happening, the qi flow through your organs and meridians, is handed down from and a product of that original primordial qi that split into yin and yang, that differentiated further into the five phases and seasons and organs. And so we are a manifestation of the oneness of everything that's out there. I just packed a book into 3 paragraphs.
Tao Te Ching or something, you could spend an hour on each little chapter, couldn't you? There's a lot there. Okay, maybe we should take a breath, it feels like...
But you asked me what qi is, and that's my most straightforward, way to contextualize and explain it.
Great effort, because not an easy thing to do. I've asked a bunch of teachers that have been on, and it's not an easy question. I'm aware of that. Do you think it's useful for people that didn't have that sort of Chinese context of language and all the idioms and all the ways of looking at qi as just part of life? Do you think it's useful for them to take it on? I'm not sure myself, because I've seen people take on the idea and almost treat it as a sort of magic power or a way to be special or something else. And I've gone, okay, how much do you have to be in that kind of cultural context to really get it?
I know teachers who are, well, wait, let me back up. Your question is, it sounds like people who are just starting to get into it and dabbling in it, how appropriate is it for them to take on? Generally, as Westerner or non-speaker,
the idea of Qi, even, is that a useful concept for people to take on?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Mm-hmm.
I think, though, that having a good teacher is, like in any practice, in any tradition, really key. And if you have a good teacher, that teacher won't emphasize the orientation or practice as anything special. I mean, this is the thing that I really, really love about Taoism and Qigong, is that the true masters don't want to be found.
Bit of a bugger, huh? Makes it tricky. Why don't they want to be found?
Humility.
Uh-huh.
Not a need to prove anything. The sense that when you find unity and oneness with the Tao, it's nothing special. That there's unity with the Tao is, Zhuangzi has described it as the great, as high as the heavens, and as low as the shit and piss.
Nice.
And that's a huge relief for me. It's like, I can do all these practices and all I'm doing is merging with what one historian described as the great clod of earth. H.R. Creel, the great clod of earth.
There's something that appeals to me about Taoism, that it has this ordinariness to it, or the magic of the ordinary, somehow it feels to me.
Precisely. It's the mystery, the ineffable, the impossible, the unfathomable simplicity of any moment. That is, it's like, thank goodness. There's no goal that's lofty. There's no kind of special experience to be had. It's just.
And that does contrast a little bit with some things in yoga culture, doesn't it? The sort of the god realm. I'm going to be this magnificent sort of Greek god combined with Indian magic powers, combined with massively sexy, but let's pretend that's not happening, combined with I'm going to be a celebrity, but let's pretend that's not happening, and I'm going to have all these, that's very much like the rock star yoga teachers, like the opposite of Taoism. There's a tension there, right?
Suppose.
But I mean, you teach at Tri Yoga. I love Tri Yoga, and it is the home of the rockstar yoga teacher in London. It's there's some famous teachers there. There's some big egos there. And, I actually really like it, to be clear, and I definitely will come back when I'm in London. And there's no doubt about it, it's not exactly a Taoist place, right?
Yeah. So can I read you something?
Please go for it.
Where is that? Yeah, so in answer to this, the 9 basic precepts from the 2nd century AD, so this is the Han Dynasty, that a Taoist priest or priestess, and this is the other thing I love about Taoism, that women have had a role. There have been the high sort of points of Taoist culture, which is the Tang Dynasty, the Han Dynasty. There were up to half the clergy members were women, and they were actually considered people who could advance more quickly to this simple oneness of the Tao than men. Anyway, so these precepts were ones that they took, and you think about the yogic precepts and the Taoist precepts, or yogic yamas and niyamas, it's quite like, don't use your sexual energy inappropriately, don't steal, don't harm, things like that. And they're good. But these are the 9 Taoist ones. First, do not strongly pursue riches and honor if you happen to be poor and humble. Fair enough. Do not do evil. Great. Do not set yourself many taboos and avoidances. So that's an interesting one, because in a lot of the yogic contexts, you would do quite extreme things to become one with.
Just a shout out to all the vegans out there at this point.
Yeah, so middle path, right? Don't do anything extreme. No too many taboos and avoidances. Next, do not pray or sacrifice to demons of the spirits of the dead. Fair enough. And then here is where I get really interested. Do not strongly oppose anyone.
Interesting.
This is a vow. This is a precept.
So you're not going to be with your placard outside the building, chanting and sort of, shouting and screaming at the sky and all that stuff.
It gets better. It gets better, Mark. Do not consider yourself always right.
It's a good reminder for me. Appreciate that. I think I like these and need these, so maybe I should print this out somewhere and put it on my wall.
Next, this is even better. Okay, do not quarrel with others over what is right and wrong. If you get into a debate, be the first to concede.
Especially on Facebook. Wise woman from the Han Dynasty 2,000 years ago, predicting the future perfectly. So what are these called then? These are great. I really like these. These are like the Taoist Commandments, right? What are they?
The basic 9 precepts in the Xiang or commentary from they're the celestial masters who took these.
In a way, though, precepts are themselves not very Taoist, are they? In a way, do you know what I mean?
No, that's not true. So this is a common misunderstanding: is that Taoism became a very strong religion in China. Especially as Buddhism came into China. So it had to compete, and they set up religious centers. They had precepts. They had gods that they could become, and there are lots of Taoist gods.
God of money, is he Taoist? Is the God of money Taoist? I heard there's a God of money in China.
Yeah. You can go and pray to that God of money, but ultimately, again, all of these gods, if you become a Taoist god, you're still just a clod of earth. You're still just soupy primordial oneness.
It's humbling. I like it.
This is great. Do not praise yourself as a sage of great fame.
Even on Instagram. Come on, Mimi, let me do that on Instagram at least. How am I going to get any customers? Oh my God. So how do you, because you're kind of a bit of a rock star, how many millions of hits do you have?
No, I'm a me, myself, and I person. I have no assistants. I have no agents. I have a literary agent, but that was like someone who came to me. I didn't go looking for that person.
Sure. I'm not saying you have a big ego and you've been very chill to work with. I never had a bad experience there, but you also, you're in the world. You've got 10 million hits on YouTube or whatever, and
I'm so bad at YouTube, and I don't really use it, and I just put it up there, and I'm bad at returning comments to people's questions.
Someone produced those videos. They're nicely done. Come on.
Me, my husband.
Really? Oh, yeah. That was nicely done. It was nicely done. They're very beautiful. I recommend them to people. Just as we're aware, if people wanted to check out a video on YouTube, what would be a good one for beginners to start with the Qigong? Maybe if they want
to like the 8 brocades.
8 brocades. Yeah, one of my students, by the way, says, thank you. I just talked to her. She says she's doing that every day and she really likes it.
Oh, cool.
There's a thank you, Liz, my student.
Let me just backtrack to the original reason I read you these precepts, because you said, I'm at Tri-Yoga. How do I reconcile that? And the precepts are how I reconcile that. I don't, they do what they do, and that's great. And I do what I do, and that's fine. And I'm not in any need to, say what someone else is doing is right or wrong. But, racism is a different issue, but I'm not going to go there right now. But the thing is that the Taoists say, act, but never do any violence, never aggressively. Act, but never seek the praise for it. Act, do things. It doesn't say don't do anything. But it doesn't say oppose something really strongly. And so it makes room for everything, and it changes with the times. This is the Taoist principle as well. And so, I'm very grateful to Tri-Yoga. I love Tri-Yoga, and I think it's, but it's like anything, and it's a work in progress.
Just want to say I'm not slagging Tri-Yoga. I've been to courses. I did their all-you-can-eat buffet for 30 days and moved to London. Loads of great teachers there, loads of friends I've met there. I love it. I love it. So I'm not slagging it off, and I'm not being political when I say that. I genuinely think it's a good place. So
yeah.
All right, good. So anything you want to say about how this Taoist work or the Qigong sort of applies to our times right now? Well, there's various politics going on. You said you don't want to talk about racism. You're welcome to if you want to, and equally not to. Equally, the COVID times we're sort of maybe moving out of, fingers crossed. anything that kind of relates to current times that might be interesting?
Well, I always said I didn't want to talk about racism because it's such a big issue for me. I mean, being a person of color, having grown up with a family that was, we're the only Chinese family within miles and miles in Arizona. But, just that I feel that one of the things that Taoism says is that effortless action, wu wei, and spontaneity, naturalness, 自然, they go hand in hand, but they're often misconstrued as either wu wei, inaction, not acting, or spontaneity and naturalness as doing whatever the hell you want.
Right, so some just near enemies there, huh?
And so, yeah, exactly. But when understood correctly, wu wei is the appropriate action without strife and struggle. So the foundations of Taoism, simplicity, humility, compassion, you have to do anything that you undertake, you do with compassion and humility and patience and simplicity. So struggle against racism, fight racism, speak out against racism, but from a place that's worked through the reactivity and the anger and the hatred and the pain to a place that's more wise and compassionate. Spontaneity, naturalism, misunderstood as just carelessness or whimsical or do anything that you want to do. No, it's actually, you have to know everything. You have to know and be informed about everything before you can be free from the tyranny of right and wrong. And then you can act spontaneously and freely. But you have to educate yourself along the spectrum of everything that's happening before you can then be free to not take sides strongly or to see past the trap of the polarity, and you can see into the wholeness. And so that's an invitation to cultivate and read and understand and get informed, and then you can act from a place that's free.
I will not ruin that by adding anything to it. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
So whether that's racism or it's COVID or it's politics, that's where I put my intention and where I put my
left or right, it definitely sounds like some medicine that could be really helpful right now. So I hope people take that one on. One question which I thought was a really interesting, simple question, which very rarely guests ask, which is, why don't more people do Qigong? So normally people come on and they're enthusiasts. They're like, everyone should do 5 rhythms. Everyone should do Sistema. Everyone should do yoga. And it's like, okay, cool. But why don't they? So I'm like, why do you think that is?
Oh, I think one reason is it's not been marketed very well, and it's not very marketable.
Okay, there's a potential issue here. Okay, go on.
You have people doing Qigong martial arts wearing pajamas versus people doing yoga and other things wearing lycra and skimpy outfits.
Okay, so the outfits are less sexy. That's the first thing. Is there something about it not giving that quick fix as well? Like I find when you go to yoga, you just immediately get a bit of an endorphin buzz and you stretch and it's hard. You feel like you're doing something hard, and afterwards you're lying in Shavasana and you're a little bit sort of endorphin stoned. And, you're going to get that. Whereas not necessarily with, in my experience of say doing Tai Chi is you might just spend half an hour annoyed and it's kind of difficult and there isn't that glow necessarily at the end. So it doesn't necessarily give that quick win.
Yeah, people like to shop around a lot now, and they like to, like you said, have something immediate. And anything that I feel that you learn takes time, and when you invest in that time and you give it the respect and the depth and the commitment that, say, learning a language is able to give and reciprocate. If you really feel then like you can go to France and speak French, it takes time, but the rewards are great. Mm-hmm. And the same thing is true with these deeper martial and Qigong practices, that they're frustrating at the beginning, and they're the type of things that take that deep respect and time and patience and dedication to learn. So a lot of people these days don't want to do that. I think and it's not necessarily to any fault of their own. They're busy. They don't have time. They feel like they need a pill instead of alternative therapy, which is slow. They want to take a pill that takes away their disease or pain or anxiety or headache or whatever it is, versus changing the way that they eat, going to bed at a different time, regulating their exercise. And so,
yeah,
but you can't expect to eat a head of lettuce if you don't put the seed in the ground first, put a little water in the soil, give it some sunshine, protect it from the wind, then letting it grow. And eventually, a few months later, you've got a beautiful head of lettuce.
yeah.
Take time. And I think people are just so unwilling to respect that. They just want to go to the supermarket and pick the head of lettuce.
Yeah. And you miss the stage. Then you feed the lettuce to an animal, and then you've got something tasty. That's the stage there, Mimi. But I was with you. I thought there was going to be a cow or a rabbit at least involved. Okay, good. Mimi, this is a delight as ever. You're a total pleasure. I love a lot of the stuff you've said. You've made things simple. I think the Taoism is so important for today. Is there anything? We still have a few minutes here. So, is there anything that you haven't covered that you would have liked to talk about?
Oh gosh, I think you're the one kind of, with some questions, and who your audience might be and what they might be interested in.
I'm satisfied. I think this was great. And, we normally end by saying, do you have a closing message about the body? And first of all, where do people find you online? I know you're a Taoist sage, so you don't want to be found, but I think there is some kind of a humble website out there, mkdeemer.com, right? That's MK, like MK Ultra. Deemer, Deem for Mark ER, Deemer.com. Is that the one you want to point people to?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you, Mark. That's, Taoist sages never want to be found. And I'm not a hermit. I'm sort of doing a hermit light now that we're out in the countryside, which is great. I have a huge love of hermits. But I think there's the modern kind of incarnation of teachings is that there's the world that's in pain, and we need to do what we can to remedy that and give some medicine out. And Taoist sages have often just, not that I'm saying anything that is equating this, but like a Taoist will hermit himself or herself. Some have even missed the entire Cultural Revolution in China, but they'll also
good dodge.
like what happened, but they also recognize when there's need in society, and to move back into society when they think that there's the balance of the Tao. It's like it's did you see Avatar?
Yes. The
So,
first action movie. Yeah.
We watched Avatar recently, but Ewa, who's the kind of the Tao, right? Or the spirit of that planet, ensures balance. And this is I think what this world is crying out for is this recalibrating and this rebalancing out of what's become kind of a massively imbalanced predilection to destruction. So, destruction of ourselves, destruction of the planet. So I think, if we have something within us to support the rebalancing of that, and the beautiful thing is that you don't have to go out and proselytize anything. You can just do it for yourself. And the Taoists believe we're part of nature. We're nature manifest in human form. There's no separation. And if you take care of yourself, you're taking care of everything around you. It's not narcissistic. It's not anything other than you're part of this. I'm looking out there because it's grass and trees.
Right.
We're part of this, and we forget. We somehow think we're separate from nature. This idea we've inherited from Cartesian thinking and from the likes of early Enlightenment thinkers, but that hasn't always been the case. And so I think we can also learn from the Taoists just that just take care of yourself. And that's enough. When you do that, everything else will kind of flow out in a way that will feel much more kind and much more gentle to the world.
It's a lovely place to end, I think, Mimi. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Mark. Pleasure.